Health experts are calling for urgent research to find out why black women are at higher risk of miscarriage. The Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists says the situation is unacceptable. One study found that black women were 40% more likely to have a miscarriage than white women. Ministers say they are committed to tackling disparities in maternity care. Our global health correspondent, Tulip Mazumdar, has been investigating.
These women are sisters in loss.
Hi there. Hi.
It's the name of their organisation, created to help give black women a voice when it comes to maternal health. All have suffered pregnancy loss.
I had my loss at 12 weeks. This was in 2018.
Natrice told me she was inconsolable when she was scanned and told there was no heartbeat.
I just collapsed. I got sick right there. And then she asked me, "Why are you throwing up? Did you come in here sick?" And I had to explain to her, "Ma'am, you just told me my baby is no longer has a heartbeat." So there was no compassion.
I woke up, was having really bad back pain, and I was told by my doctor when I called that I was just constipated. They told me to come back in a few hours for an ultrasound. I never even made it back to that ultrasound because I miscarried at home.
All four women described numerous occasions when they didn't feel their concerns were taken seriously by clinicians.
I just don't think we're being listened to and heard in the spaces.
Do you think it is about the colour of your skin that?
Absolutely, yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, it really is a struggle all around when it comes to our maternal care.
Dr. Schreiber is an obstetrics and gynecology doctor in Philadelphia and is working to improve maternal outcomes with a focus on black women.
A black woman's risk of miscarriage after 10 weeks of pregnancy is double that of a white woman's risk of miscarriage at that stage. Now, the reason behind this disparity is probably multifaceted and still remains unclear. Race is socially constructed, so it's probably not the risk factor, but racism and gender bias, these are at the root that underlies most of these health disparities that we see in maternal health.
There's your baby's heart beating, so that's nice and reassuring.
3,000 miles away in Coventry in the UK, Professor Quemby runs a recurrent miscarriage clinic at University Hospital. She's also a leading researcher in this field. She's currently trying to get funding to investigate some of the many unknowns around why black women are at higher risk, including looking into any potential biological factors.
We know, for example, if you're black and Asian, then you handle glucose less well. So we know you're a much more increased risk of gestational diabetes. We also know that the balance of bacteria in your vagina is different in black and Asian women to white women, and we know an imbalance in the bacteria in your vagina has been associated with miscarriage and preterm birth. So that's another area we can look at.
There's clearly a myriad of complex and difficult issues at play here. But the longer we don't have answers to some of these key questions, the longer so many women will continue to suffer needlessly.
One idea Professor Quemby and her team is already working on is an app where women in the UK will be able to input their clinical details like ethnicity, weight, and whether they've had any previous miscarriages. They'll then get specific evidence-based advice on how to lower their risk of a loss.
I feel very optimistic because more conversations are occurring about it, and the more exposure this gets, then other women feel more comfortable asking the questions.
That report from Tulip Mazumdar. And I'm joined now by Professor Ari Kumarasamy, who is Director of the Tommy's National Centre for Miscarriage Research. Professor, thank you very much for joining us today. And I know that you have looked at a number of studies, about 19 studies, I believe, that show a 40% higher risk of a black woman having a miscarriage compared to a white woman. But as I understand it, there isn't an answer to why that is yet.
Anita, that's absolutely right. We don't yet know why it is that black women are at greater risk of miscarriage. There are three areas that we are pursuing in terms of why this may be the case. The first is there an increased genetic predisposition that gives Black women a greater risk of having miscarriage. We know that Black women are more likely to have certain conditions like fibroids, a condition called SLE, diabetes, and so on, and these can increase the risk of miscarriage. The second area that we are pursuing is whether the cause could be, the increase in risk could be related to social and lifestyle factors such as diet and housing and so on. And the third is, of course, access to healthcare. We know that Black and other ethnic minority women have difficulties in terms of accessing healthcare, and that could compromise their chances of having good outcomes. So there are many avenues that need to be pursued. Answers are not there yet. We need to find them through research, and this is an utmost priority at the moment.
Do you think, as was alluded to in Tulip's report, that this is to do with gender bias, perhaps with institutional racism even?
I think gender bias would certainly have an effect on the experience that women have with healthcare provision. But in terms of whether it is causing the miscarriage itself, I think it is unlikely.
And the suggestion that institutional racism may be at play here, what do you make of that?
I think that is certainly an important issue. We know that that is a real problem. At the moment, the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists has a task force that is looking at this particular issue, given how important this is. So I think it does have a part to play. But in terms of the increased risk of miscarriage, I think we need to look for biological reasons, other reasons that are amenable to treatment, and research is desperately needed to unearth answers here.
So while that research is happening, what can be done in the meantime? What sort of targeted care can there be for Black women who want to have a child, who are pregnant, to make sure that they can carry their babies to full term?
I think it's really important to individualize care. So we know that ethnicity has a contribution to make in terms of risk of miscarriage, but there are many other factors: female age, body mass index, smoking, lifestyle factors, and so on. So all of these need to be factored in. And the software, the Tommy's app that you mentioned earlier, would have a definite role in terms of particularizing, individualizing care for a woman. So I think all risk factors will need to be factored in, and an individualized approach should be put in place for women.
And briefly, making sure they feel heard, because if someone feels heard, they're more likely to engage with the advice being given.
Absolutely right. Unless women are encouraged to seek healthcare, we won't be able to make any difference. So I think breaking down the barriers that women generally have, but particularly ethnic minority women have, is absolutely vital to making things better.
Professor Coomarasamy, thank you very much for your time today. Professor Ari Coomarasamy there, Director of the Tommy's National Centre for Miscarriage Research.